value the gift. I mean, a gift's not measured by the price tag, per se. You know, I hate sometimes you'll have like a Secret Santa at work or something, and you buy junk because, you know, what can you get for $10? And then you just, I hate participating in those things because everybody just gets something dumb. At least my family trades. Once you get the present, everybody said we have a trading thing. They bought me a giant coffee mug and really stole it and they gave me, would give it to me. But, you know, how do you value these? It's not measured, like I say, by the price tag. It's measured by what you put into the gift, in your thoughts. It's what it means to the person who's receiving it. That's how it values it. And so today's lesson is the same thing. How do we value the gift that Jesus gave us? And God gave us. And that's what Paul's talking about in Romans chapter 3 here, because he's warning the church. Now remember, Paul never been to Rome yet. Never been there. So he's warning the church there, as same warning he gave the church in Colossae. He's warning them that everyone has sinned, everyone's fallen short of the glory of God, but we've been justified through Christ. And he says that in verses 23 through 24 of this translation. But he's saying the gift is measured by what went into it. Did Jesus put thought into the gift? The crucifixion?
His life.
Because he was scared of it. You know, he thought about it. That's serious. And he, for a moment, wondered if there was any other way to set us free. You know, that's what he said. So, we've all fallen short. So, it's easy to question God's dealings with us. Especially because his ways aren't our ways. There's so many things we wish to just say, you know, God, I really want this. And, you know, and expect him to answer. It's a bit of a dichotomy because on one hand you've got the fact that it says, you know, whatever you pray for, you'll get it. And faith is a mustard seed. And so you pray these things, you say, well, I got faith that's slightly bigger than mustard seed, and I believe in this, and we don't always get what we want. We always get it. And usually it turns out we get what's best for us, but not always in my time. So I want you, for this first idea, what would you do with humanity if you were God? Because as God looks at us, you know, and he says, well, what did God say in Noah's day? He said, everything you're thinking about is evil from the time you get up in the morning. Every thought is evil. And it wasn't the only time that God said, I think I'll just kill him and start over again. He said that more than once. And so, if I was God, I'd probably be saying it every day. You look around you and say, what is wrong with this world? You know, what have we come to? So, is there any part of your salvation that is still a mystery to you? What is mysterious in the whole idea of our salvation? Karen?
I would say the translation from earthly to heavenly. We're told that it's going to be mortal to immortal, but because we haven't experienced that, it's hard to explain. I suppose that would be the biggest question.
Okay. How about when we talk about this, I think the other way, but the statue of Lady Justice, you know, in the scales. Well, wait a minute. I've always been a good little church boy. You know, elder's kid, preacher's kid. I didn't do anything nearly like my friends did. So why should my salvation be the same as theirs, or why should they get it? And, you know, that's kind of a mystery, but God's going to answer that a little bit for us tonight about why he can do that. So just think about how God's been working in your life recently. What he's done for you. What are your expectations of him? Life is not easy. In fact, what did he say in the garden to both the man and the woman? What did he say their punishment would be?
They're going to be working hard, and she's going to have some painful childbirth.
Yeah, it's like, you've chosen this, so now your life's going to be hard. And we say, that was 10,000 years ago. Why are we still paying for it? But that's what it is. It set in motion a whole string of events that include the pain and sorrow we go through in life now. So,
Jeff,
yes.
there's always consequences to sin.
Mhm.
It may be near term, may be long term, but there will be.
I saw today a state level judge, I think it was in Arizona, that was exposing herself in a public park.
What?
And of course she's been arrested. It was seen by a lot of parents, and I don't know the whole story because it just was so disgusting I didn't read it. But, here's a person who went to law school for how many years, all that, and just for the sake of some cheap thrill, throws everything in her life away. And I'm sure probably ruined the family in the deal if she had one. So, but we need to think about how God's working in our lives. Things that God is doing. Just a very small thing. Recently, we've been we're still growing, we're still expanding, and had a couple things happen that I've been praying about. We had a guy come to us about a job, and he is everything we need: master's in social work, the counselor. He also was a DCFS investigator for 30 years. That's great. And when he came, the guys told me, they said, this is what he's asking money-wise. I went, nope, we can't afford that right now. Oh, but we really want him. And I said, just go to him and say, we can't afford it right now, but give him some options. He said, I really want to do this, so I'll take half of it. I got a retirement from the state, I'm good. And then our guys have been desperate to get a counseling center purchased, and they've looked at all this stuff, and none of them, these guys are too young and uneducated in the ways of the world, I guess, but they're looking at all these places that were going to cost a fortune to buy and a fortune to remodel, and then all of a sudden, same night, I called our realtor, and Patty called our realtor separately about the same property, and the realtor says, that's interesting because I thought it had promised. I'd already set up for myself to go see it tonight. Y'all want to go with me? Bought it on the spot. Took it away from the realtor. She wanted it. But we bought it on the spot. I close on it next week. God answering prayer. See, it's all these things that are outside, more than just my health, more than just my life, more than just my job. God's working in a lot of areas. And I see this as not so much God answering my prayer, but answering our prayers for the children of the community that we can open up this new counseling center, which is going to have a number of counselors in it. So, God is working in your lives. Somebody read this for us tonight, please? Romans chapter 3, 21 to 31.
All right. But now, God has shown us a way to be made right with Him without keeping the requirements of the law, as was promised in the writings of Moses and the prophets long ago. We are made right with God by placing our faith in Jesus Christ. And this is true for everyone who believes, no matter who we are. For everyone has sinned. We all fall short of God's glorious standard. Yet God, in His grace, freely makes us right in His sight. He did this through Christ Jesus, and He freed us from the penalty of our sins. And for God presented Jesus as the sacrifice for sin. People are made right with God when they believe that Jesus sacrificed His life, shedding His blood. This sacrifice shows that God was being fair when He held back and did not punish those who sinned in times past. For He was looking ahead and including them in what He would do in this present time. God did this to demonstrate His righteousness, for He Himself is fair and just, and He makes sinners right in His sight when they believe in Jesus. Can we boast then that we have done anything to be accepted by God? No, because our acquittal is not based on obeying the law. It is based on faith. So we are made right with God through faith and not by obeying the law. After all, is God the God of the Jews only? Isn't He also the God of the Gentiles? Of course He is. There's only one
No. Okay, so Paul's kind of created a stalemate here regarding God's laws. Because he's talking about, if we've done all these things, should we be punished? No, we can be justified. We're all been acquitted, but we had nothing to do with it, etc. Was watching a court case the other day, and a guy he gets up to the judge, and he's being really respectful and quiet, and the judge said, okay, prosecution. The prosecutor said, Judge, the person that accused him of this and that he got arrested for, now is saying they lied. And the judge said, he's been sitting in jail all this time? Said, yeah. And said, not only that, they didn't show up anyway today. So the judge looked at the guy and says, how would you like to go home today? I like it a lot. He said, your probation's almost up, isn't it? How would you like that to be over right now? I'd like that a lot. He said, then go home, everything is done. He said, he had to have a process from jail, obviously. But he said, it's done. Probation's over. There are no, he said, you didn't do anything wrong here. You get to go and kind of wipe the slate clean on the other side too. That's what God does. He says, you know what? Jesus says he's not going to accuse you. And we don't trust Satan, so you're free. No probation, no rules you got to live by. It's over, it's done. So Paul says the laws are good, but law is not enough motivation for us to live up to God's righteousness. So, question, what are the two main motivations in life for anything? Anything.
Money.
Well, so reward.
Okay, reward.
And what's the other side of that? The flip side of reward. Punishment, right. I mean, those are the two incentives. Now, I'd love to say just love alone with nothing on the side. But really, the main incentives for us is reward or punishment.
Oh, I hate it.
She's giving me this weird look out there. Let me slow this down for the people in the back.
Thank you.
So, whether the law is present or not,
That's my video.
we can't obey it perfectly anyway. No matter what the law is, we're not going to. We're still sinners, and so we're in a predicament. But Paul's laying his foundation for the good news that follows later, because he says, this is the mess you're in. It'd be kind of like going to, if you're having financial trouble and you go to a financial counselor, and the first thing he's going to do is say, you have messed up. These are all the ways that you're in deep over your head. But then they say, but there's a way out of this. That's what Paul's doing. You're in over your head. You can't get out of this mess alone. But I've got a solution for you. So as we're reading it, justification refers to God's declaration that we're not guilty of our sins. Justification says you've been redeemed through no work of your own. Jesus paid the penalty. And atonement, so redemption, okay, let's back up. What is justification? Because these are three important words.
Well, I have this little ditty that says, just as if you had never sinned.
Same one I teach at camp all the time.
Okay.
I'm justified as just as if I never done anything. Okay, I'll give you the next one, JC. What is redemption?
Being brought back.
Somebody pays for you to get back, right? Yeah. You've been redeemed from your... And then, what's atonement?
Somebody's covered everything for you.
Somebody paid the bill. Alice and I, and that's a neat feeling. Alice and I were at La Patrona a while back, and we're kind of becoming more and more friends with the elders, and so we're sitting there, we're having dinner, and we got ready to go, and I called the guy over and I said, hey, I need my bill, and he goes, no, you can go. I said, I haven't paid yet. He goes, the owner did. So I went up and hugged her, and she goes, oh, guys are here all the time. She atoned for our meal. And that feels good, even in some smallest, because it was just lunch, we weren't spending $20, you know, for a Coke, no. But she paid the bill anyway for us, and that's nice. And that's what, so justification, God declares you're not guilty. Redemption says you've been bought back. And atonement says, and you've been made well again, you've been included again. That's what's important to know. So, questions. What does Paul say all people share when it comes to God's law and standards?
All have sinned,
And, just that verse.
fallen short of the glory.
Are we able to keep the law?
No,
Why not?
because we can't figure it out.
You know, 2 Corinthians 10:5 says, you can't control your own thoughts. You can't. Maybe it can be as little as you saw something inappropriate, whether it was TV or work or in the city, and you try to, you know, as men we try to look away, we try not to think about it, and then it does something like pops up when you least expect it in a dream or in your, you know, in your head, or he says you can't control your own thoughts. We're just not smart enough, not good enough. Yeah.
We can't follow the law because the law is no good anymore. The old law is no good because we were continuing to sacrifice just to push that sin further out. We needed something, someone, to atone for our sins. Even if we wanted to, quote unquote, follow the law. How many people are actually going and taking 2 turtle doves to the high priest to have them sacrificed? I'm just saying, you cannot follow the law any longer because either you manipulate the law to make it how you want it to be, or you understand that Jesus Christ is the only way. And if you follow the old law thinking you're going to get through without Jesus, you're wrong.
I agree 100% with what you're saying, but we still have rules. You know, we still have rules on this side of the cross.
No.
So when I said the law, I'm just talking about the context getting crooked. I'm talking about the law of just Christian living. You know, I'm not talking about the old law, although that's right. The old law was impossible. And he says that it was impossible to keep that. But in the new law, we still have rules.
We had the
Love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second is likened to the first, love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, there's 2 laws right there that we're expected to keep, but we're unable. Mike?
We had the 10 Commandments that we can use as a guideline also, very simple.
9 of the 10, we can, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not keeping a Sabbath.
We're not keeping the Sabbath anymore. But yeah,
I thought that was what we were talking about in Romans, where we're reading right now, is the
Paul
law.
is writing to Christians in Rome.
Right,
And so it's a mixture of Jews and Gentiles.
right. But he's basically, when he says God's law, he's referring to the Old Testament.
I think he's,
Trying to let them know about just keeping in context, letting them know that you can try to follow the law all you want, but it's no good because, and then he goes in through Romans and basically explains why the old law is no good any longer. It's for learning, not
yeah.
but that's what I was thinking.
And he does make Paul, because he is a Old Testament scholar, he does make, but if you think about the Gentile side of the equation, they're not even trying to keep the old law. It means nothing to them. So his lesson has to be for both.
Well, at the beginning, it talks about circumcision, so that is the old law.
Mhm.
But Jews were trying to get the Gentiles to be circumcised as well.
Yeah, again, he's writing, this would be like you writing to a church in Timbuktu, a letter of encouragement. You know nothing about them, their practices, their whatever. So you keep it kind of general to to encourage them, to strengthen. And you know the kind of sins that they have, the same kind of sins we do. Maybe it's a different setting. Alon at lunch the other day was talking about the fact that he grew up in a home of islanders, even though he didn't really grow up in Guyana. He was little and he moved. Then they lived in the Bahamas. But he said, funny the things you learn when you move. He said, in Ghana we don't use silverware, we use your hands. That's what God gave you fingers for. And he said, I had a date with this girl in Quebec. And it's my first ever kind of date. I went to her home to have a meal and sat down and I started using my hands on the meal. And the parents went, we've got silverware. And he said, I was so embarrassed. He said, but I didn't think about it because my whole life in our home, that's what we got. And I said, in Kenyan homes you use the masa to scoop up, or whatever they call it, I can't remember the word for it, but you use that to scoop up your stew. In Haiti, you don't use silverware most of the time, you use your fingers for everything. So, different cultures are different ways, but we know basic etiquette. Another one we can't do, Ephesians 4 says, you can't avoid having a negative attitude. We all have our hot spots for things that we see it and it just bugs us, and we shouldn't. For me, it's seeing an addict. I was at the airport, so Allison was coming back Monday. Like I pushed back and pushed back and pushed back, and 5 minutes before they were supposed to get on the plane, it got canceled. So they had to drive another hour back to my sister's house, and then the next morning, go to the airport at 6 again, and in the morning, that'll give you a bad attitude. But the point was, I'm sitting in the airport at O'Hare, and this guy came over, high as a kite. I see him there all the time. He's always panhandling. And he starts clapping really loud. It's me sitting there and another guy, 2 chairs over. And he says, look at me again and see what happens. I'll cut your hearts out. The guy next to me just said, security! And went back to reading his paper or whatever it was. He said, I'm going to kill you, as he ran out the door, getting away. I really don't like addicts. Because that's not my world. And I just don't understand. But in their world, it's commonplace, and it's no different than any of my sins. It's the same, but we as humans have trouble with that. I saw him.
Mine.
Terry.
Because my first thought went to, well, maybe he's not an addict, maybe he's schizophrenic or bipolar.
I know. And by judging, I could have been totally wrong.
Yeah.
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 And she called me on my behavior for a tailgater. Just be quiet.
Just calm down while you're driving.
He could have been on his way to the hospital with a pregnant wife, and you could
We
be
don't
like,
know. Yeah, and he's
Yeah.
going, come on, get out of my way.
So, alright, I know this is elementary to y'all, but how are we made right with God?
There's only one way,
How's that?
putting on Christ and surrendering to Him everything, and then decide not to sin anymore. Doesn't mean you won't, but at least you know you're going to try not to.
Verse 24, Paul says, God's grace. Yet it is God in His grace that freely made us right in His sight. God made the choice to do it freely. So what's wrong? What's required of it? Verse 25 went on to say, people are made right with God when they believe that Jesus sacrificed His life, shedding His blood. I'll just say this. Romans is very heavily, I understand why some religious groups say faith only, because Romans is very heavily faith saves you, faith through. And we know that that's more to the story, that you can't just read that with blinders on and not see any of the rest of it. But Paul says a lot about this. Your faith has put you in contact with God's grace, basically. So how did He demonstrate His righteousness in not just dismissing people's sins? Because God could have just said, you know what, Jesus, you're right. I'm not going to put you through this. You're my only son. So, we'll just call it all fair, everybody's free. Why can't He do that?
He can't do that because He's just. If He goes through and says, well, yeah, Jesus, don't do this right now. I'm just going to let them do what they're going to do. You know how we do our teenagers when we're sick of dealing with them. Just let them do what they got to do, and then they get worse and worse and worse until they're killing each other. Well, there's less people to deal with after a while. I mean, there's so many ways it could have been. But He said, no, I can't do this, and they're just messed up.
Yeah, it would make everything else He did unfair.
Yep.
If he didn't doesn't punish us, but he punishes those in the past, he's not just.
And he did a lot of that.
So how does God's plan demonstrate his fairness towards humanity? So the other was about justice. How did God demonstrate his righteousness?
Mercy.
It says, verse 26, for he was looking ahead, including them in what he would do in this present time. So even back in the beginning, God was looking forward to the present time with Jesus. And he did this to demonstrate his righteousness. See, he wanted us to be able to look back and have that teacher. They're going to be, if they live righteous under the law, they'll be saved. Ben?
Also, he makes it fair because we all have the same opportunities. There's not a chosen people anymore. It's not people that he's chosen and just lucked into this lineage. It's people who have chosen him. So we all are playing by the same rules. We all know what's expected of us, and it's our choice whether we make it or not.
And do we have an excuse today for not knowing about God? Not really.
I don't think so, because there's so many opportunities if you want to know about him. All you gotta do is look around. There's something out there bigger than you.
I read a while back, and I hate to say a number because I'm probably wrong, but I believe it said that the American Bible Society has now given away 90 million Bibles in like 300 something languages. There's not much excuse anymore. Brian.
Galatians says there is no excuse anymore. So you can't sit there and say you didn't know. That's removed. You can't just say I didn't know. It's known. You have to make your choices and make them wisely.
And as we said before, every culture has the same basic biblical stories. They're moving away from God over time has made them twist them, mess them up, break them. But that just shows that the whole world was taught, just as the Bible says. There was no culture that was not reached at one point, and then, okay.
Even the Ethiopian eunuch.
Don't get into my sermon. That's 2 weeks away.
Okay, so everybody will forgive me then.
Yeah.
Even he knew that there was something, and he took the opportunity to study. Could he understand it? No. Because he said, how can I unless somebody tells me? Now, there's that. Even if you don't understand what you're reading, you may not know how to get into Christ. You may not be taught right to get into Christ. But if you're very interested in it, you'll find a way to do that. You'll go to somebody or go somewhere and find out how to do that. And if we're all available to somebody, then we're still bringing them in and teaching. And we're supposed to go and teach them.
And I think that's going to be one of our biggest downfalls when we go to judgment is he's going to say, did you? Unfortunately, we don't do enough. I saw a hand. Is that Bruce? Is that you had a hand up?
Yeah. It takes as much grace to forgive somebody who swears a lot as it takes somebody who has killed 4 people.
It does.
And the reason it is because it takes grace to save. Some people need more grace than others. That's God's justification. We see how he demonstrates his justice. Now here's your monkey wrench to destroy your lesson. Jeremiah.
Oh man, back in Jeremiah, now we got to start another year's worth of class.
We're in 14th chapter.
Okay.
Thus says the Lord to the people, even so they have loved to wander. They have not kept their feet in check. Therefore, the Lord does not, therefore the Lord does not accept them. Now he will remember their iniquity and call their sins to account. So the Lord said to me, do not pray for the welfare of these people. I'll just stop right there. The idea was that these people did not act like they wanted salvation. Jews, he came to save them and told them how to be saved. He says, well, they're not gonna change, so we're gonna skip right over. And I'm gonna punish them. Now, some would say, well, where's the grace of God? Grace of God is if you don't turn your ways, here's the justice of God. I will punish you. I will hurt you.
I always think, I'm like that, don't waste your time praying for them. Well, I always think, trying to think how to word it, that's where the grace is so great, because that person that God has said you might as well, the New Testament says, shake the dust off your feet and move on. If they seek Him, God's going to provide a way. It may not be us, but He will, if not can, He will provide a way. Jump into my sermon a little bit, but the eunuch, we see this miracle of him going to say, I want you to go over there, and miraculously gets him to the person he needs to be with. And they study, and then he miraculously moves him away. We say, well, see, that's not happening in our day and time. But it may not be happening in a miracle that that I baptize somebody and I disappear and I reappear in Haiti. That may not happen. Don't think it will. But at the same time, if that person is praying for help, God will make sure that it's available to them. Now, if they don't take advantage, if they keep their door shut. But as an example, just this past week, Luther said, he said, I know it's really tough here, and he said, I've got, I think we're up to 40-something orphans, and I don't have the money to send them to school. And he said, do you think you could help? Well, I checked with Julie, and I had not realized, but I had my Haiti fund was over $5,000. So we paid 1 year's full tuition for every orphan in the school, plus some. I sent him money to get them uniforms, too. See, Luther was praying for a way to keep those kids in school, wanted to educate them, because education is so important in knowing God, right? The ability to read and study. But more than that, he knows they're going to get Bible studies in his schools. And they may not get that at home. Like you say, when we just ignore the teenagers, okay, you be one of the 2 house moms in our orphanage with 40 kids, and tell me how much time you're going to spend in doing Bible studies with them. I mean, good grief, by the time she cooks 2 meals and does all their clothes, because they only have 1 set, so she washes every day, or 2 sets, she washes every day. Those who've been there know what I'm talking about. Sometimes we put on wet clothes because they didn't dry in time. But God is making a way, and it came from, across the ocean. And I don't know where the money came from to be in my account, but it was there. So we used it. Okay. Anybody else have their hand on that last one? JC, I'm sorry.
Thinking about grace, on the Day of Atonement, there was a procedural that the priest went through. It was written down, they followed it exactly. And they didn't kill and sacrifice more animals 1 year because the people were worse that year than they were the year before. There was one procedural thing. They were saved by the grace of God. It was one thing. Just now in Christianity, we follow the scriptures. It says Christ died once for all. There's no extra thing for a person who has done a lot of bad things, and there's no a fewer thing for somebody who is really well taught and rigid in Bible principles.
One religion that we're very familiar with teaches, without thinking about it, teaches that grace is not, that Jesus' gift alone was not enough. It was Catholic. And it's through their penance payment system of saying, well, you'll be forgiven if you do these things. And the next person comes in, well, you'll be forgiven if you do all these things. You know, they are teaching in the confessional, and by the assignment of penalties, they are teaching an inequity in God's grace. And as you said, Jesus died once for all. So there's not an earthly punishment through religion that we should go. We have to just come back to God, period. Yes.
You're absolutely right. In fact, that's where we have the issues. As humans, we want to value everything. We want to try to equate it to something. And we have to try to say, oh yeah, this is, yep, you did it. This is this many Hail Marys in our fathers. Where this one, not so bad. You know what I'm saying? And so they want to do value system. We always do that. You know, in our lives, we always do that. You know, even you hear about somebody who did something that was really bad that you would have never done. And in your mind, you're like, well, that was really bad. Where somebody else, you said something to somebody that was kind of rude and you weren't paying attention. You know.
And we teach it to our kids from the very beginning. Good example, just a couple weeks ago, Halloween. How many of us have treats for every kid that comes to the door, and then special treats for the kids of friends we know or church friends? We all do that. I mean, some good candy bars or some, something. But then we got the little, we got Greg's bag that we stole from his to take home for the trick-or-treaters. You got those little sugar pills things, Smarties or whatever. But, for other kids, you got good stuff. When we lived on Lincoln, and we would have hundreds of kids every Halloween, when the weather was decent, they didn't get great treats. But there were bags around the corner for church kids. We teach that from a very early age. Some people deserve more than others. We can't. Good grief, I didn't even get halfway this time. No, that's okay. So what should prevent us from bragging? I'm saved. I've been washed in the blood of Christ. I am going to heaven. No ifs, ands, or buts. What prevents me from bragging about it?
This is the law. You're not judged by what you did any longer. See, before you could have said that. I've met all of these things. I am above that now. I have made it where you could brag about that, but God says there's no more, because there's no more law that you have to worry about like that. And that's what keeps us honest, and that's what proves the strength and the power of Jesus Christ's blood.
How in the Terry?
It has nothing to do with how much you did. You could never achieve that by yourself. Sometimes we get a job or we do whatever, and we think we've made it because we've done enough to earn. In this case, you can't.
Terry?
Right along with what Hal was saying, the first thing I think of when I see that, what should prevent believers from bragging, they didn't do it. It has nothing to do with them. They surrendered to Christ, accepted a gift that God offered, and that's, if you were a Jew, you had to do a lot of stuff right. But as a Christian, there's nothing we did. You can't sin too much or be too good and acquire anything. It's not you.
Yeah.
If you're gonna boast in the Lord.
Amen, brother.
What have we done compared to what he's done?
Mike, and then
Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God.
we'll drop down to 27. Can we boast then that we've done anything to be accepted by God? No, because our acquittal is not based on obeying the law. It was based on faith. Ron?
Well, if you're going to brag about something and say how great you are, it just goes to show that you've already sinned again by the fact you have lost your humility. And so you start the process all over again. So it's a never-ending cycle if you are giving yourself credit for what you've done.
That's like the old, I forgot where I heard this right on. It's like, well, I tell you what, I never oh shoot, I lied again. You know, that's just how we are. When we start bragging, we don't go back to anything because we're still, you know what I'm saying. Anybody else on this question? One more question. Has God shown you that He is both just and merciful to you? I hope so. If you don't think He has, I know it's hard to read. If you don't think He has shown you grace and mercy, justice, start over again. I don't know what to tell you. Start studying, because He has. He has.
Mercy alone.
And that's why church, not just, Allison had reprinting the attendance sheets tonight. Well, how many times you get a check mark by your name has nothing to do with going to heaven. But the importance of having those check marks by your name is to be in fellowship and be surrounded by the gospel, the word, to keep you on track, keep you thinking. Okay, I'm going to stop there.
Are you telling us to be quiet?
Nope.
Got announcements.
I'm telling you, it's not going to be